In this video, we're going to talk about the JavaScript Executor, which is an interface from Selenium WebDriver that allows us to actually run JavaScript code in the client-side browser. JavaScript code is extremely useful to be able to run in the browser because it allows us many different types of operations that are not natively available through the Selenium WebDriver API. And so using JavaScript execution, we can do all sorts of cool things. This is potentially one of the most useful videos in this course because this is a very common use case where using the JavaScript Executor. So how it works is we have the JavaScript Executor interface that comes from our Selenium WebDriver package, and we use our driver and we cast that driver into a type of JavaScript Executor object. So you can see that now this JavaScript Executor object is stored inside of this variable. And then we use this JavaScript Executor to execute script. Now, there are actually two methods on the JavaScript Executor interface. There's the execute script and the execute async script. However, almost nobody ever uses execute async script, and the most common one to use is execute script. So in this case, for example, you can see we're passing in some string, which is actually some JavaScript code, and this string will actually pop up an alert on our browser. Here's another example of how we can utilize JavaScript, and don't worry, we'll get our hands on more JavaScript code with actual practice. In this example, you can see that we're doing our normal find element, storing that inside of an element object. Then we're creating our JavaScript Executor, again, by casting a driver into a JavaScript Executor interface, and then we're using it. In this case, we can do a click using JavaScript. See that? It will do a click. So as opposed to Selenium WebDriver, which does a web request, it actually sends a web request through the wire to do a click. We can do it from client side, meaning through the browser using JavaScript, we can click. This is a very common, very useful situation to do with JavaScript because a lot of times a WebDriver request may not be capable of doing a click. I've seen that multiple times, and so we can bypass that by using a JavaScript click or some other type of click that may be available through our native web application API. Here's an example of how we can do a scroll with JavaScript. So you can do the window.scrollBy and say how far you want to scroll, and this is another example of that. In this video, let's talk about windows and frames because they are more challenging. I want to show you actual code examples so that we can completely comprehend everything that's going on. So we are inside of this class here, inside of our solution. Make sure you check all of your imports and everything is set up exactly like before. Have my driver, have my element, have my setup, have my teardown, and then we are inside of this Windows frames method. So let's actually step through this code so that you can see exactly what's going on. So I'm going to throw a breakpoint here. I'm going to do a debug, and then we will analyze the code as we step through it, and you will learn a bunch of important methods here that you have not seen before. So this will obviously just navigate to the URL. So we're going to use our debug window to step over. And so now if we come here, you can see here we are at this new URL where it gives us the possibility to open a brand new window. So actually clicking this link opens up a brand new window. So rather than clicking it, I wanted to show you some JavaScript execution so that you better understand what's possible with that. So here we are creating our JavaScript Executor, and I'm just going to step over it, and you can see that now we have our JavaScript Executor object. You can see that it exists down here, and it has different properties and methods associated with it. Now, using our JavaScript Executor, we can execute script. Again, as I told you, we can execute any JavaScript that we want. And so a command in JavaScript to open a window is this. And then we are going to navigate to this URL here, and that will actually open a brand new tab, which is also known as a window in Selenium. I think that's an unfortunate naming of the windows in Selenium. Really, they should have named them tabs, and then it would have been tabs and frames, but they named it window, which is fine. But just remember that window is synonymous with a tab. And so this will open up a brand new tab to this URL. So let's actually go ahead and step over this and look. Right now we have a single tab, and now we're about to have two tabs. Boom, see that? So now we've got a brand new tab on this URL open. So now let's proceed. Here is a new method that you haven't seen before, and this is from the driver object, and it's called window handle. Let's step over it. And what this actually does is it provides the unique ID of the current window that has the focus, the current tab. And so we haven't switched to any new windows yet. So if you were to guess which tab has the focus right now, it is the first tab. That is why I called it the original window. And that's why I've stored this unique ID into this original window variable. And so you can see when we get the window handle, it actually this returns this unique identifier, and which is just a string, and then we can use it to identify which tab we are actually on. Okay, makes sense? And you can see the unique identifier down here. Now, if we call driver.getWindowHandles, it will get us all the tabs that are currently open. So if I step over this, you can see that now I have an object, a set, which is a type of object, a set of handles. And you can see that down here. Always be looking at your variables and be reading what's going on. Look, I have handles. You can see that it says it's a size 2. If I expand it, look, I have the first element, which, look, it matches to our original window. See that? You can see the ID matches up to our original window. And the second window, which has its own unique identifier. So this set allows us to know all of the tabs that are currently open. So then I'm simply using this handles object to remove the original window from the set. So let's step over this and see exactly what happens. Now look, we only have one object in the set, and it's the second one. Look, remember our original window? This is our second window. So now, here we are just getting the value of this object right here using the handles.iterator.next, which are just methods located on the handles object. And so we'll just step over that. And so then that gives us that next window string. Look, here's the next window string. Here's the original window string. We've stored both in variables, so they are now available here. So now at this point, we can switch to the second window. So look, with driver switch to window, and we're going to switch to the next window, which will be that one. Okay, so let's step over it. And nothing new really happens in the browser, but it happens underneath that you know that now this new tab has the focus. And so actually that's exactly what we're going to check is, how do we know that this new tab has the focus? How do we know that everything that I just been telling you isn't a full crock of BS? Well, because we can check the title of the window. Look, this window is called new window, and we can use driver.getTitle method to get the current title of the page that we are on. And I can show you that this actually has that title because we can right click and we can inspect. And in every HTML, there's a head element, and inside of there, you can see here is the title of this page right here. It's called new window. So if we assert on this, it should pass. And there it does pass. So now if we use the driver.close method, it will actually close this window that we are currently focused on. So let's step over that. So that is really the only use case for driver.close, is to close different windows whenever you want to close them. Now, driver.close has a different behavior. If there's only one tab open and you use driver.close, it will actually kill the browser as well. However, we ultimately never want to use a driver.close to end all of our sessions, because it will not work whenever we go to remote WebDriver execution. We always want to be doing driver.quit. That's actually why we have this in our teardown method. So driver.quit is always the way we want to kill the session, even though driver.close will currently kill the session if I call it, because there's only one tab open. Okay, makes sense? Even though it has that behavior, don't use it for that. Use driver.quit for quitting the session. Use driver.close for closing the tabs. Okay, so now here we're going to switch to our original window, which now it has this focus. And so with that said, we should now get this title, and it'll be a brand new title because it was our original window. So again, let me show you that I'm not just making stuff up. We'll come here, we can go into the head, and then if we go into the title, you can see that it says the internet here, right? So I'm not making stuff up. Let me close this. And let's do this final assertion. And it has passed successfully. We can finish the execution by clicking this button, and you can see that our test has passed. So that was a very in-depth moment where you just learned a lot of important methods and a lot of important functionality. Let's talk about frames. Frames are pesky little guys because they can throw any automation engineer for confusion when an easy to find element is not able to be found. And frames are ultimately like embedding one HTML page inside of another HTML page. And frames are pesky because if you don't switch into the appropriate view, aka the appropriate HTML page to interact with the elements, you'll get a no such element exception. It will be like you're not even on the correct page for trying to find an element that should exist. Let's discuss this further so that you better understand. So take a look at this URL over here, okay? If we look into this HTML, you can see that we have this frame set, and inside of this frame set, we have two frame elements, right? You can see the tags here, frame 1 and frame 2. You can see when I hover over them where it highlights. Now, anything that we try to find inside of frame top can be found only by switching to frame top. So let's look inside. Open this up. You can see that in here is its own entire HTML, right? You can see it has its own HTML body, it has its own head, and it has its own information such as the text that is called frame left. And you can see even it has multiple different frames inside of it. It has a frame left and a frame right and a frame middle. And you can only get to these frames after you switch to the parent frame. So in order to get to any of these three, you have to switch to this one first, and only then can you find these elements and start interacting with them. Otherwise, you're going to get a no such element exception. Does that make sense? Let's talk about another example, frame bottom. If you want to see anything inside of frame bottom, which can be located by its name attribute, you have to switch to it, and once you've switched to it, only then can you inspect the HTML and potentially get something like its body and read the text of the body. Let's take a look at the code. You can see here that I am inside of a method called frames. Let's start debugging this and you will better understand exactly what we just talked about. So the very first line, standard, is going to navigate to that URL that you just saw. Now, we can switch to different frames by several mechanisms. One of them is by switching by index. Index now in our case, because we are currently at the top level frame, meaning that we are here, we can only see two frames. We can see this frame and we can see the bottom level frame. So we can either switch through 0 or through 1. So I'm going to switch to the second frame, right? The second index in our frames. And so now you can see that if we perform this assertion on this element looking by the body, it should return bottom because we are currently focused on the bottom frame. Let's step over that and see how that worked. Now, there is a switch to parent frame method that comes with the Selenium WebDriver API. Parent frame will simply move the focus to the top level frame, the parent frame of whatever frame you are currently in. That doesn't mean the very default frame, right? In our case, if we have three frames, right? Frame 1, inside of frame 1 we have frame 2, and inside of frame 2 we have frame 3. Switching from frame 3 using parent frame will move us to frame 2, and the parent frame of frame 2 will move us to frame 1. Hopefully that makes sense. So now in this case, we are going to switch to the very top. So see that? We can also switch frames by simply passing in their name. Frames should have a name, and so we're just simply referring to them by their name. So this will take us to the top frame. This will take us to the left frame right now. And so now if we try to find the element by the tag name and get its text, it will return left. If we try to do, it will not ever find us a bottom because we are simply not in that view right now. We are exactly in this frame right here. We can't interact with any elements in this frame. We can't interact any elements here or here. We can only do stuff that is inside of this HTML body. So if we do that, it'll return us left. Now, default content, that's an important one. This one will simply take us to the very top of the HTML. It doesn't have anything to do with frames. It just basically takes us up to the very top. So if we were very nested deeply inside of iframes, we can just get out just by going all the way to the top. So for example, let's step over this. So now I'm at the default content. So let's pull out our little inspector and let's see if I have. So now, for example, if I try to find frame top, do you think it will work or not? We are at the very top HTML level. Yes, that will work because remember at the very top HTML level, we have both frame top and frame bottom. So let me see, I don't have frame bottom here, but I can just change this. And, oh no, that didn't work because, oh yeah, I guess you have to go navigate into frame top to get into frame bottom. So look, that failed. So look what happens. If we switch to frame top, oh, I know what I did. I switched to frame top and of course it couldn't find frame bottom because it's inside of frame top now. So if we switch back to default content and then we find element frame bottom, will it find it or not? Yes, there you go. It should find it because at the very top level we have frame top and frame bottom. Sorry for the confusion. Now, if we wanted to find frame left, will it be able to find it? No, it will not, because we need to get inside of frame top to be able to find it. So switch to frame top, execute that, and then now let's find frame left. See that? It does find it. So if we want to get out of all of this, not care, and just start interacting with the rest of our elements, we've dealt with all the information in the frame. That's where you use the switch to default content. And so that is the purpose of that. And so now actually let me execute that so this doesn't break. Switch to default content. There we go. And now if we do this assertion, of course, it'll find frame top because it has those two at the very root of the HTML. So now you know everything there is to know about frames.